"You cut off my power during a storm," I said into the howling wind barefoot, wrapped in a soaked blanket flashlight, clenched between my teeth. Karen from the HOA smiled like she'd just won the lottery. "Rules are rules," she said, sipping cocoa on her perfectly lit porch. That's when I decided no more warnings, no more second chances. If she wanted to mess with the grid, she was about to find out who built it. The storm had rolled in just after sunset, a slow, thunderous approach that soaked the streets and rattled windows until the whole neighborhood huddled indoors. Everyone's porch lights flickered on automatically, including mine, except mine didn't stay on within minutes. My entire house went pitch black. No power, no heat. My smart thermostat went dead. My security system chirped once before fading, and worst of all, the fridge stopped humming. A problem, considering I just stocked it with over $500 of groceries. At first I assumed it was a simple outage. I walked outside to check, expecting to see a blackout down the whole street, but every other house glowed like a Christmas tree. My neighbors' lights were fine, their ACs hummed, TVs flickered behind curtains. Even the inflatable flamingo in Dave's front yard was still flapping in the rain. Mine was the only house in total darkness. I went back inside and tried rebooting the system from my phone. Error. I logged into my utility dashboard. Access denied. A new message appeared at the bottom. Power service suspended due to HOA violation. Contact HOA administrator. I froze. The HOA? Since when did they have any authority over my utility service? A sharp knock echoed from the front gate. I pulled my coat tighter and trudged out into the rain with a flashlight on. My gate, sealed in a plastic sleeve, was a bright orange violation slip with Karen's signature at the bottom. Unauthorized generator. Use HOA code 8B7. Immediate disconnection mandated. I laughed out loud, confused and furious. Generator use? I didn't even have it running. The storm hadn't knocked anything out yet, and my solar system was on standby, waiting for grid failure. That never came because technically the grid didn't fail, it was cut. I marched through puddles to Karen's porch, where she stood smugly watching the rain from behind her glass door. She didn't even flinch when I banged on it. When she finally opened it, she looked at me like I was a drowned rat who'd wandered into the wrong suburb. "Karen," I said, my breath fogging in the cold. "You cut my power?" "No, the HOA did," she corrected, smug as ever. "Your solar backup was flagged as non-compliant. Grid-tied systems aren't allowed to auto-engage without HOA review. It's in the bylaws." My backup wasn't even on, I snapped. "And even if it was, you don't have the authority to cut residential power." She smiled like that was the punchline. "Well, maybe we don't, but we did. And if you want it back, you'll have to submit a compliance review, pay the fine, and wait for board approval. You know the drill." Then she sipped her cocoa. I stood there soaking wet, watching her living room lights gleam behind her like a warm stage set. While I stood freezing in the cold, something in me snapped. Not rage, not desperation, something cleaner, calculated, cold. I turned away mid-sentence and walked home without another word. Let her think she'd won, let her enjoy her moment, because the next one would belong to me. I entered my home through the side door, heading straight to the locked utility room behind 2 layers of biometric security. I opened the door to my private command center. Monitors glowed to life, one after another, illuminating the room in soft blue light. Status dashboards, live feeds, diagnostic tools, and one central control screen at the far end that read, "Welcome, Administrator." Because here's the thing, Karen didn't know. She thought I was just another homeowner, another number in her petty HOA spreadsheet, another nuisance to dominate with fines and citations. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just connected to the power grid, I owned it, or at least the company that ran it. I was the CEO of the regional utility provider that supplied her precious HOA and over 47 other communities with energy, the same company that signed off on her meters, the same company that managed solar integration, backups, maintenance, and yes, disconnect notices. And the only reason she had the authority to cut off my house was because she'd found an obscure compliance clause that hadn't been updated in years, buried under paperwork from 3 company acquisitions ago. That was on me. But not for long. I sat at my desk, fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard, digging into access logs. There it was, 3 hours earlier. Karen had called into the HOA's private access line, speaking with a junior tech who handled minor reconnections using her outdated HOA admin credentials. She'd submitted a manual disconnect request citing code violations. The tech, new on the job, saw the HOA flag and green-lit the disconnect. A 1 in a million fluke. She thought she'd gotten away with it. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The rain tapped harder against the roof. A lightning bolt lit up the entire room. For a second, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have restored my power instantly. I could have reversed the cut, overwritten her flag, and gone back to normal. But this wasn't about light or heat anymore. It was about the principle. It was about reminding people like Karen that when you play power games, you'd better know who actually holds the switch. So instead of restoring my house, I began building a case file. I pulled her call logs, captured the footage from my door camera, showing her violations, logged her breach of grid protocol, and cross-referenced every HOA meeting where she'd pushed unauthorized control. What she did wasn't just rude, it was illegal. She'd tampered with a regulated grid. I sent an internal message to compliance: begin silent audit, HOA Sector 19B, focus on unauthorized admin overrides. Then I cracked open a soda, sat back in my chair, and watched the storm rage outside. My house was still dark, but the wheels were already turning, and Karen was about to find out exactly how bright things could get when you poke the man who owns the light. The next morning I woke up in a cold house, but I didn't mind. I left the power off on purpose. Let it be a monument to her pettiness. If Karen wanted a power struggle, I'd give her one, with the kind of subtle, elegant chaos she couldn't even see coming until it swallowed her whole. I showered using water I heated the old-fashioned way, ate cereal in the dim light of the rising sun, and started making calls. Not to the HOA, not to neighbors, to the internal departments of my utility company. I wanted everything done officially and quietly. No trace. No blowback. At least not yet. By mid-morning, I had 2 compliance officers auditing records from HOA Sector 19B. I marked the entire HOA neighborhood as a watch zone under the company's quality assurance initiative. That meant every electrical irregularity, outage, spike, or manual override from that zone would now be logged and reviewed. Even light bulb flickers wouldn't go unnoticed. Karen wouldn't see any of this yet, but soon she'd feel it. I started receiving alerts. By noon, their clubhouse had a hot tub wired in with unapproved equipment. Karen's cousin, who lived in Unit 8, had an illegal underground cable that ran directly into the HOA office for his side business. He ran crypto miners in his basement and was drawing enough power to light a small village. Most interestingly, several smart meters in the neighborhood had been bypassed and replaced with non-compliant models, all of them flagged under Karen's authorization. She wasn't just playing queen of the HOA. She was playing queen of the grid. And badly. By that afternoon, I received an invite to the HOA's monthly board meeting. It was scheduled in 2 days. Normally, I didn't go. I paid my dues like everyone else and avoided the circus. But this time I accepted. Not as myself, though. I set my friend Nolan in my place. A man with a perfect poker face and an encyclopedic memory of HOA bylaws. I'd stay behind the curtain, feeding him lines through a small earpiece while I monitored the meeting live from a drone positioned outside the clubhouse. Nolan dressed like your average tech-savvy retiree. Cargo shorts, baseball cap, slightly offended expression by default. Karen wouldn't know what hit her. As the meeting began, I watched the residents gather on folding chairs under the flickering fluorescent lights of the community hall. Karen stood at the podium, gloating over new rules she planned to push through, including advanced control over individual power allowances during storms, which was just HOA code for "we'll cut who we want." As she spoke, Nolan raised his hand and asked as innocently as possible, "Do these new rules apply to everyone, or just the people Karen doesn't like?" Karen stiffened, gave him the look she usually reserved for teenagers who rollerblade near her driveway, and said, "The rules are applied equally across all units." Nolan nodded like he believed her. Then he pulled out a folder and began reading from it, listing the exact energy draw of the clubhouse, the dates of unauthorized disconnections, and the HOA Charter's clause stating that utility control must be handled by licensed professionals only. Karen's face turned pale. She tried to interrupt, but Nolan kept reading. "And one more thing," Nolan said cheerfully. "As of 8 a.m. this morning, your entire neighborhood has been reclassified by the provider as a conditional use community. That means your rate structure has changed. You'll receive your updated billing summary by Monday." Karen looked like someone had pulled the plug on her internal fan. She sputtered, "You can't do that. That's illegal." Nolan smiled. "It's not illegal when the company that powers your entire neighborhood changes your classification based on how often you tamper with infrastructure. That's called policy enforcement." I watched it all from my screen, grinning. She didn't know yet, but her little empire was already cracking. By the end of the meeting, several residents were grumbling. One asked if Karen had really authorized power shutoffs last night. Another complained that her freezer full of meat thawed. Someone yelled, You can't just cut people's power because you don't like them. Karen snapped and shouted back, I was protecting the neighborhood. That's when Nolan dropped the real bomb. Protecting us from what? The only house without power was the one that owns the company feeding your light. The CEO lives here. You cut his power, and I promise you, he's not going to let that go quietly. There was a silence so deep you could hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights above. Karen's face went red. A few residents looked at each other, realizing what had just happened. A few even started clapping. Karen abruptly ended the meeting and stormed out. Later that night, the first revised bill hit the HOA's inbox. Triple rates, backdated for 2 months based on estimated unauthorized use. The system also auto-generated penalty assessments for tampered meters. The total came to just over $17,000. Karen sent a furious email to the utility company demanding to speak to someone in charge. She got an automated reply thanking her for her inquiry and placing her request in the queue. I read her message while eating popcorn. But I wasn't done. The next day, I ordered a friendly neighborhood audit, scheduled with the city's infrastructure team. Just a routine inspection of utility integrity in communities flagged for irregular usage. I didn't even need to be there. They do the rest. When the vans pulled up 2 mornings later, yellow jackets stepped out with clipboards and thermal scanners. Karen came running out of her house in a pink bathrobe, shrieking that she hadn't received any notice. The inspector calmly replied that this was standard protocol, and they were only here to ensure public safety. Then they found the underground line from Karen's cousin's house. Then they found a bypassed smart meter linked to Karen's garage. And finally, they found the old water heater from her pool system, hooked into a separate, undocumented grid line. Karen shouted something about raccoons chewing wires. The inspector raised an eyebrow and asked, Do raccoons usually install surge protectors? I watched the scene unfold from the live drone feed, sipping my coffee. Karen didn't know it yet, but she had just set off the first wave of the storm. She wanted control. She wanted authority. She wanted to be queen of the cul-de-sac. But she forgot something simple. Power doesn't come from rules or votes or HOA meetings. It comes from the current, the grid, the wires under the ground, the systems you never see but can never live without, and I control them all. By the following week, Karen's nightmare had fully materialized in the form of a single piece of paper. A crisp white envelope stamped with the logo of my company was slid under the HOA clubhouse door early Monday morning. Inside was the updated commercial billing statement. The number was bold, unavoidable, and delivered. Like a slap across the face, $17,243.89, due immediately. The itemized breakdown included everything from unauthorized load usage to the penalty charges for smart meter tampering, with neat notes beside each line filed per code section 14.3. Infrastructure misuse. Karen didn't take it well. The HOA group chat, yes, the same one I had complete access to, was pure chaos. Messages flew back and forth faster than I could scroll. One neighbor was furious that her power bill had tripled without warning. Another was threatening to sue the HOA for endangering seniors on oxygen. Someone even uploaded a screenshot of their frozen dinner defrosting mid-cycle. Karen tried to play it off, saying it was a clerical error and that she had it under control. That was a mistake. Later that day, one of the residents, Edgar, a retired judge who normally stayed out of neighborhood politics, marched into the HOA office and demanded answers. I had surveillance footage from the drone that caught the whole interaction. Karen tried to bluff, claiming the billing was being reviewed, but Edgar calmly explained that he'd already contacted the utility company's legal department and received confirmation that the reclassification was legal. He then asked her if she had documentation proving her authority to override grid access during a storm. She had none. That night, Karen held a closed-door emergency board meeting, but the minutes were leaked within the hour. Apparently, her plan was to bribe a technician from the utility company to fix the meters back to residential settings. Under the table, she didn't realize the technician she called was part of our compliance sting. We'd been waiting for her to make a move like this. The conversation was recorded, filed, and quietly sent out to every single resident in the HOA through an anonymous email link. Watching the fallout was like watching dominoes fall, each one smacking the next with a satisfying thud. Some neighbors laughed, some were furious, but everyone agreed Karen had gone too far. It didn't help that the footage showed her offering the guy a gift card and a bottle of wine in exchange for resetting some numbers. Her voice, high and smug, carried through the video. It's not tampering. If nobody reports it, they reported it to turn the screws. Even more, I authorized a temporary scheduled maintenance blackout for grid calibration. The beauty of the system was that it could be directed block by block, street by street, or house by house. I didn't target everyone, that would have been cruel. No, I picked only the key players in Karen's circle. Her house, her cousin's crypto bunker, and the HOA clubhouse. Power to all three was shut down at precisely 8 p.m. on Friday, right as Karen prepared for her live-streamed interview with a local podcast about community leadership. She had candles burning in the background and was mid-sentence when the lights went out. Her reaction was pure gold, a gasp followed by an unhinged "what the hell?" Meanwhile, every other house on the block remained fully powered. In fact, I'd made sure of it. I even had the lineman leave a little tag on her breaker box section, isolated for audit. She knew what it meant. Everyone else did too. The podcast never aired. The backlash reached its peak that weekend. A group of residents called an emergency community meeting. Karen tried to cancel it, citing unfair targeting and personal harassment, but it was too late. The people had had enough. One woman stood up and shouted, "I didn't vote for a dictator." Another, holding her frozen groceries that had thawed out twice, screamed, "You owe me 3 lasagnas." But the real turning point came when a man from Unit 12 read out the HOA's own charter and pointed to the clause that allowed for immediate recall of any board member acting beyond their authority. The twist: only registered utility-paying members had the right to vote. Normally, that would have included Karen, but due to her illegal tampering, her utility access had been locked pending review. She wasn't technically a customer at that moment. She was flagged as a suspended account. That meant she couldn't vote, and neither could her allies. I watched it unfold via Nolan's hidden feed from his phone. The vote wasn't even close. Within 15 minutes, Karen was removed as president of the HOA, stripped of her authority, and replaced by a soft-spoken grandmother named Doi who brought cookies to the meeting. Karen protested, ranted about bylaws and deep state utility hacks, but no one listened. In fact, the only thing anyone said to her as she packed up her things was, "Don't forget your wine bottle bribe." As Karen stomped away, someone from the back of the room played a recording of her infamous line, "It's not tampering if nobody reports it." The room erupted in laughter. It was over, but I wasn't done yet. After the vote, the HOA board received a cease and desist letter from my company's legal division. It outlined every infraction, every violation, and every piece of evidence collected. It made it clear that if one more unauthorized adjustment was made to the grid, the entire neighborhood would be restructured into commercial rates permanently. They were given 30 days to complete infrastructure reforms and submit new compliance protocols. Karen, now dethroned and disgraced, tried to challenge the vote. She sent a letter to the county. Unfortunately for her, the county utilities supervisor happened to be my cousin Roger, a man with no patience for nonsense and a deep appreciation for justice served cold. He dismissed her complaint in one sentence: tampering with power infrastructure is not a community right, it's a felony. As news of her downfall spread, the HOA's private Facebook group, once a battlefield of passive-aggressive memes and petty arguments, became a celebration thread. Neighbors posted RIP Karen's rain memes and jokes about the great lasagna outage. One even made a mock energy bill with Karen tax listed as a line item. My house stayed dark for a few more days, not because I had to, but because I liked the symbolism. I only restored it once. Doi, the new president, sent me a handwritten note with a plate of cookies and an apology on behalf of the community that I could accept. Karen had finally learned what happens when you play with power you don't understand. And I was just warming up. Karen may have been removed from power, but she was not done, not even close. While most dethroned HOA tyrants would have slunk into quiet resentment or relocated to the nearest neighborhood with fewer rules and more wine, Karen chose chaos. She believed she could win this war by going underground, both literally and figuratively. Rumors began spreading that she was planning a comeback, not by appealing to the HOA, but by targeting the grid directly. When I heard she had a guy who could break into any utility system, I nearly choked on my coffee from laughing too hard. But as ridiculous as she sounded, I didn't underestimate her. People like Karen don't go down gracefully. They go down kicking, screaming, and trying to drag as many down with them as possible. That's how I came to know about Kyle, the so-called tech genius she hired. A 20-something dropout who once jailbroke a smart fridge and now considered himself a bridal hacker. Karen brought him into the neighborhood under the guise of being her nephew. He wore a hoodie, carried a laptop with anime stickers, and walked around like he was the second coming of Elon Musk. He scoped out the utility boxes, poked around transformer stations, and even managed to sweet-talk one of the neighborhood maintenance guys into giving him access to the old HOA maintenance shed. What he didn't know was that the entire area was now on a passive surveillance program. Every box, wire, and conduit was fitted with tamper detection. He was being watched from the moment he touched a fence post. It only took 3 days for Kyle to make his move. He attempted to tap into the service conduit behind Karen's house, the one previously flagged for her cousin's crypto operation. As soon as he pried the panel open, the tamper alert triggered. Lights on a nearby utility pole blinked red, a motion sensor kicked in, and then came the real surprise, a low buzzing hum overhead as my drone unit, disguised as a wildlife monitoring camera, swooped down and activated its warning sequence. A recorded voice blasted from the speakers in a monotone voice. Unauthorized access detected. Step away from the conduit. Kyle dropped his screwdriver like it was on fire and bolted, slipping on a wet patch of grass and landing flat on his back. Karen, watching from her back porch with a glass of boxed rose, screamed like she just witnessed an alien invasion. The footage was gold. I packaged it neatly, edited it slightly for clarity, and sent it anonymously to every resident in the HOA with the subject line, "Your grid, your rules." Within hours, it was circulating on social media, complete with music edits, reaction clips, and memes titled Karen and Kyle versus the drone. It went viral locally and made Karen an unwilling legend. She tried to spin it, claiming she was testing security and making sure the system could handle future emergencies. Nobody bought it. The neighborhood now saw her as a laughingstock. Her supporters, what few remained, quietly disappeared. The media caught wind. A local news station ran a segment titled, "When HOA Goes Too Far," featuring blurry footage of Karen yelling at a buzzing drone and Kyle holding a pizza box over his head to shield himself. The interview they managed to get with Karen was even worse. She tried to play the victim, saying she was being targeted by a shadowy power cartel and that she was only trying to defend the neighborhood from corporate overreach. The anchor deadpanned, "You mean the company that provides your electricity?" Karen responded, "Yes, them. They're bullies." The network ran with it. Overnight, Karen was transformed into a living meme, part HOA dictator, part tinfoil conspiracy theorist. Back at the neighborhood, the fallout only deepened. Karen's house became the punchline of every group chat. One resident even put up a cardboard cutout of a drone in their yard with a speech bubble that said, "Step away, Karen." A bakery downtown made cupcakes with little drone toppers, selling them under the name Grid Justice. It would have been funny enough on its own. But then came the final blow. My legal team had finished compiling the evidence, not just of Karen's unauthorized override, but her tampering, the bribery attempt, and now the attempted hack on critical infrastructure. While I had no intention of pursuing full charges, I wanted to make it clear there were consequences. So we delivered a cease and desist letter to Karen's home. But not just any letter. This one came directly from our federal compliance liaison, stamped with the Department of Energy seal, citing potential violations of federal energy regulations. It wasn't an arrest warrant. It didn't need to be. The message was clear. Next time, she wouldn't get a letter. Karen fainted at the mailbox. A neighbor captured the whole thing on video. Her second in command, a man named Leo, who once loudly claimed Karen is the HOA, tried to rally support to overturn her removal. He failed spectacularly. At the next HOA meeting, when he attempted to call for a vote, the crowd booed him so loudly that he walked out mid-sentence. Someone threw a flashlight at his feet and yelled, "Here, in case Karen cuts your power too." The new HOA president, Doi, handled the situation with more grace than I ever could have. She announced a full internal audit, canceled all pending fines issued under Karen's reign, and suspended all power-related enforcement clauses until they could be rewritten in coordination with the utility provider. She even invited me to the next meeting, which I respectfully declined. Instead, I sent Nolan again, this time with a tray of pastries and a message. "May your circuits be ever stable." I watched from my home office as the drone feed showed neighbors smiling, kids playing, and people finally talking about things that didn't involve HOA drama. The power was on, the lights were bright, and best of all, the people had reclaimed their voice. Karen, meanwhile, was stuck in a house she couldn't sell, in a community that mocked her, with a reputation that would outlive her property taxes. She tried once more to appeal her removal by sending a formal complaint to the state. Unfortunately, that complaint had to go through the county utilities supervisor first, my cousin Roger. Again, he called me and said, "Want me to sign it in red pen or just staple a clown nose to it?" I told him to do both. Karen's last public appearance was on a trashy reality show that did a segment on nightmare neighbors. She thought it would be her comeback. Instead, they used every embarrassing clip they could find, her her yelling at drones, bribing texts, even that old footage of her yelling at kids for sidewalk chalk. The segment ended with the narrator saying, "Some people seek power, others just trip over the cord." And just like that, Karen was done. Finally, peacefully, completely undone. It took a few more weeks for things to fully settle, but for the first time in months, the neighborhood began to breathe again. Without Karen's constant interference, the HOA returned to something resembling what it was supposed to be, a group of neighbors working together, not a power-hungry soap opera. Under Dee's leadership, real change took root. Meetings became civil, transparent, and occasionally even fun. Gone were the hostile debates over lawn ornament height or mailbox paint shade. In their place came discussions about improving community events, upgrading the dog park, and planting more trees along the sidewalk. The HOA, once a battlefield, was starting to feel like a neighborhood again. From my end, I made sure the transition was smooth. The new board worked with my company's liaison to rewrite their power-related bylaws. We provided them with a simple portal that allowed for transparent communication regarding utility matters, removing the potential for another rogue Karen-style attempt at grid manipulation. I also offered a grant through the company's Green Initiative Fund to install solar panels on the clubhouse roof. It would both reduce their energy costs and add a layer of clean power backup for emergencies. The board accepted gratefully. Doi even insisted I visit in person to accept their thanks, but I declined with a smile. My work wasn't about spotlight moments. It was about making sure people like Karen never had that kind of control again. The changes didn't stop with policy. Inspired by recent events, several residents came together to propose a community appreciation weekend, complete with a picnic, music, and a dedication to resilient living. Someone even joked that it should be called Powerfest. The name stuck. Flyers went up all over the neighborhood. I donated a set of rechargeable LED lanterns to be used as party favors, and the event was powered by a hybrid solar generator system we quietly set up in the background. As the big day arrived, the weather cooperated. The turnout was incredible, and not a single fuse blew. One of the highlights of Powerfest was a simple wooden plaque mounted next to the newly repainted clubhouse door. It read, "Powered by the People." Beneath it, in smaller letters, was etched in memory of Karen's outlets. It got a big laugh when it was unveiled. No one even knew who had written it. I did, but I preferred to remain in the background, watching from afar as families danced, neighbors mingled, and the community came alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. And then, as if summoned by irony itself, Karen tried to make a final reappearance. She hadn't been seen around the neighborhood in nearly a month, choosing instead to stay indoors, draw the blinds, and probably Google how to sue your own HOA. But on the day of Powerfest, like a moth to a bonfire, she stepped onto her porch in a sun hat and oversized sunglasses, as if that would disguise her identity. She lingered near the edge of her lawn, watching the celebration with what could only be described as reluctant awe. For a moment, no one noticed her. But then a group of teenagers, recognizing her from the viral drone video, began whispering and pointing. One of them yelled, "Hey Karen, want to charge your phone? We've got power." Laughter followed. She flinched, turned, and went back inside without a word. That was the last time I saw her in person. In the weeks that followed, Karen quietly sold her house. Or rather, tried to. Her reputation had become so infamous that local real estate agents had difficulty convincing buyers. One listing even had to include a disclaimer: HOA recently restructured. Previous leadership no longer active. Eventually, she managed to transfer ownership to a couple from out of state who had no idea who she was. When she finally left, there was no fanfare. No goodbye. Not even a moving truck. Just a single U-Haul trailer hitched to a rusting SUV creeping down the road as the sun rose. A neighbor caught a photo of her departure and captioned it, "The power has left the building." With Karen officially gone, the community went from surviving to thriving. Inspired by the drone incident, the board launched a safety and infrastructure awareness campaign, teaching residents about how the grid works, how backup systems function, and what to do in emergencies. Nolan hosted a workshop on smart energy usage that ended with him dramatically flipping a circuit breaker while wearing a superhero cape someone handed him as a joke. Kids loved it. Adults appreciated it. And Daddy made sure everyone went home with fresh cookies. In the spirit of renewal, I decided to contribute one more surprise. At the next board meeting, a large crate was delivered to the clubhouse. Inside was a sleek digital display board, custom-built by our tech department, with live readouts of the neighborhood's energy use, weather alerts, solar generation stats, and emergency notices. At the top, it read, Calm Community Grid Monitor, managed by you. The residents gathered around it like it was a monument. It was the final piece of reassurance they needed. That power wasn't something they had to fear or fight over anymore. It belonged to all of them. But I couldn't resist one last touch. At the base of the display, carefully carved into a brushed steel plaque, was a quote. Never let someone who doesn't understand the system be in charge of the switch. Below it was a small pixel art engraving of a drone, complete with tiny propellers and a miniature camera lens. The board laughed for a solid 5 minutes. One resident pointed and said, "That drone deserves its own HOA seat." Life moved forward. The HOA transformed from a punchline to a model of how neighborhoods should function. Other communities even reached out, asking how they'd managed to turn things around so dramatically. Emission. Du gave interviews. Nolan became something of a local legend. And the Karen incident, as it came to be called, became both a cautionary tale and a rallying point. New homeowners learned about it during their welcome packet walkthrough. Kids wrote a play about it for a school project. One clever teenager even released a rap song titled Step Away from the Conduit. Narration. As for me, I finally turned my house lights back on. Not because I needed them, but because I wanted to. I sat in my living room that night, every bulb glowing, every circuit humming, sipping tea as the automated blinds slowly closed. Peace had returned. Not just because Karen was gone, but because the community had reclaimed itself. They remembered that power isn't about control. It's about trust, transparency, and knowing who you are when the lights go out. Somewhere out there, Karen was probably stewing in a smaller neighborhood, picking her next battle, already scanning for rule books to twist. But here, in this little slice of suburbia, her reign was over. And the grid? The grid was stronger then.